Welcome to the Big Success Show. Today, the one thing you need to know to retire early.
You're overwhelmed, so much to do, it seems like such a mess. If only you had coaches who could bring you big success. Bring you big success. So lean right in, learn how to win. Entrepreneur nurturing, tips to be your best. With a professor and Mary-Lynn for your big success.
The one thing. It reminds me of a movie, City Slickers, Billy Crystal and Jack Palance, right? Curly. Curly had that.
Here's the one thing. There's the one secret to life, right?
That's right. So how do you win the game of life? How do you win the money game?
This is the money game of life.
That's right.
The one thing.
That's right. And that starts with a G.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the second G.
Yeah, the
and
two
big.
G's. Yes, big with two G's.
So here's the thing. You can't just think about today. You also have to think about tomorrow. And you have to think about that all the way through to retirement. So think about today, tomorrow, all the way through retirement. Mm-hmm. That's how you win the money game of life.
And the one thing, the one answer to the one question that you need to know is...
After all the earnings and all the spending, how much is left? That's a critical question to ask yourself, a critical answer to know.
All right, so let's get into how do we get that answer, because it's so important.
Well, and let's just kind of, the benefit of understanding this, so let's just kind of set up a scenario here, Mary-Lynn. So picture a line, right? You can picture a line on a big line, a long line.
A big with two G's line?
Exactly.
That's a very big line.
Now, at one end, you've got a person who has this what's left of zero. Their earnings and their expenses equal. There's no what's left. Zero.
I live paycheck to paycheck, basically.
You do.
Okay.
Yes. Now, you're saving nothing. When can you retire?
Never.
Pretty much. That's the answer, right? Unless you're willing to live on Social Security, or something like that, you're stuck. I mean, you've got to keep working in order to retire. So now let's go to the other end of the line.
All the way to the other end of that big line.
So let's just say, what if a genie came and paid all your expenses? So all you had was income. Oh,
wow.
I can picture that.
I'm keeping everything.
That's right. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah.
When you think about it, even if I used to think if you could go 1 month without having to pay any bills, and then, just you get to bank that would be just a huge plus for everybody, right? But the point is, what we're trying to say here is you're saving 100% of your income. Mm-hmm. Well, would you agree with me that you could retire earlier than someone who saved less than 100% of their income?
Of course.
Yeah. So the point of this, extreme examples, the point of this is the person who saves more can retire earlier. Mm-hmm. Okay? So not only that, but the bigger the gap between your earnings and your expenses, the sooner you can retire. We just proved it with our situations.
Right.
You save nothing, you can't retire. Save 100%, you can retire sooner than anybody who saves less than that. But as I go from 10% to 20% to 30%, whatever you can save, the higher that amount, the sooner you can retire.
All right. Well, we've looked at the two extremes. The person who's saving nothing to the person who can save everything.
Yeah.
Let's look at a more realistic example.
Okay. So let's just say because the number's round and I can do it in my head. Okay.
Well,
we're going to say
that's good because we can all do it that way too.
We're going to give an example of somebody who makes $100,000.
Okay.
Okay. So your income is $100,000 a year, and you're able to save 10%. So it's going to take you 10 years. 10% times 100,000 is 10,000. 10,000 times 10 years is 100,000. It's going to take you 10 years to make that $100,000 that you currently earn. Mm-hmm. Okay. But if we could just find a way to save 20%. Just 20%, okay? Now, that's significant.
Yeah.
Back some time ago, everybody used to say, put 10% aside. Now you're increasingly seeing people saying more like 15 to 20%.
Okay.
We're living longer. People are retiring early in some cases. So there are reasons to do that. But the point is, let's just say you save 20%. So 100,000 times 20%, you're saving 20,000 a year. It only takes you 5 years to get to that $100,000 equal to your income.
So the more you can save, the more that you can sock away, the faster you are to getting to retirement.
It really is simple, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're not talking here about the fact that that money that you're investing is going to make money, which is going to make more money. That's beyond the scope of what we want to talk about today.
And
but
you
we
can
just
cut that time even down even further.
Precisely. You cut it down, or you have more money than what you expected, right? So now let's go back. Actually, before I do that, let me point one thing out. So we just said that about the making money. Just always keep that in mind. There's always a bonus. But boy, it's all driven by how much you invest, how much you save. That's where it all starts. Now, what we're really trying to do today is just give you motivation, inspiration. Yes, it's hard to save money. Yes, there's demands on our money. But if you can just find the motivation, the inspiration to just do one tiny thing, save just one little bit, it's a good starting point, okay? So let's look now at a person who makes that person who makes the same $100,000. But let's just say they save 50%.
Wow, that's
crazy,
a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, we'll talk about that in just a second, but it's idiotic to even talk about this, isn't it?
I mean, some people are extreme savers.
They are. Yes, they are. And there are people who are saving more than 50%. But we're going to talk to you about this 50% here in just a second. So let's just say they save 50%. Well, in 2 years, they've got the 100,000. Remember, we gave an example. One person that took 10 years, one person that took 5 years. They've got it in 2 years. Now, here's the thing. We think this is really hard, but if you're married, all you got to do is get to the point where you can live on one of your incomes. And you will, let's assume you're both making the same amount of money. You'd be saving 50% a year if you could just do that.
Yeah.
And we think that's hard, but if you just bank your pay raises, you'll find that you'll get to that point a lot quicker than you think.
All right, Professor, you've given us a number of examples on ways to save and even an ambitious goal with the 50%. But how do we grow that gap between earnings and expenses? How do I start working now towards saving more?
Well, if we just think of the simple formula, Mary-Lynn, earnings minus expenses equals what's left, right? So
It gets us back to that question.
it does. And that's why that question is so important, because that question is, in a sense, the driver of everybody's financial
And
future.
the question again, for those who've forgotten it,
Well, the question really is what's left. After all the earnings and after all the spendings, what's left? So the way that we grow the what's left is we have two choices. We can either increase earnings or we can decrease spending. Okay, let's take the earnings one first. Because in the long term, the only thing we can do is increase earnings. What I mean by that is, in the long term, if our expenses are all as low as we can put them or get them without seriously impacting our level of happiness, we can't go any lower than that. So we have to have a life too. I mean, we're not saying just live in drudgery for year after year after year.
right, you can cut yourself to the bone.
Precisely.
So if that's not the option, you have to just bring in more.
Right. Just like a business can cut costs too much and it impacts their sales, we as individuals with our households can cut costs too much and it impacts our happiness. So we don't want to do that. We want to have happiness now and happiness later. But long term, the only way we're going to be able to increase this gap is by increasing earnings. We have to be aware of that. The cost can only go to zero, right? Costs can only go down so much. So if we've got a $100 a month cable bill, we can stop getting cable and our cost is now zero, but nobody's going to pay us to not have cable. Okay? See what I'm
Darn it.
saying? Yeah. So
Right.
it can only go to zero. But the thing is, our income can go up and up and up
Well,
and up.
there is a limit to that. You know,
Okay.
some industries will only pay a certain level. Aren't there limits to how much you can make?
Of course, there are limits now. But what about tomorrow and up through retirement? Okay. You can get new certification. You could get a new degree. You could get, there's all kinds of things you could do. You could get new
Which
experience.
costs.
It costs money, sure. But that's beyond we're not talking about investments yet. That's a whole different show.
Okay.
But the point is, I can do things to increase my income, and the amount that income can increase is really kind of limited only by probably your own mindset.
Okay.
Okay, so it's important to understand that. Now, here's the real key.
So what you're saying is, of the two ways to close that gap between earnings and expenses, the two ways are increase earnings
Wait, Mary-Lynn. Increase that gap.
Increase
Yes.
the gap, right? The two ways are to either, make more money
Yep.
or cut costs. You're
Right.
saying make more money is really the way to go because you can only cut so much.
It's the way to go long term.
Okay.
Okay, long term. Because the point we're really making here is start looking now. Because we tend to have opportunities right underneath our noses. We don't see them. We don't see that open door of opportunity. The point is, start looking now for your opportunities, because you may not find one at first. And the thing is, even if you don't take advantage of them, just getting in the habit of recognizing opportunities.
So you're looking for opportunities to make more money.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. So the next thing then is what you were getting to, Mary-Lynn. So actually go back. What can you do to supplement your income? That's just a question to always be thinking about. Number 2, then, how do we decrease spending? Well, in the short run, it's far more easy to cut spending than it is to increase our income. It's more controllable. We have more control over our expenses.
When I'm living in the now, my salary is what it is now.
Yes.
I can't ask for a raise until, X amount of time.
Yes.
Or I did just get a raise and here's where I am for a period of time. So that's, unless I take on a side hustle, this is my income for a while.
Precisely. Yes.
So now if I want to decrease that gap, I have to cut
Increase
costs.
that gap.
I'm sorry, increase it.
Yes.
I keep thinking decrease the. Okay.
Right. No, you're
increase,
right. I understand what's going on, but yes.
Increase the gap, then I need to cut my spending.
Yes. And the point to understand is this is the short-term thing, right? This is the now, as you said, which is that's a very astute observation. In the short run, remember we said the income increase was all about long-term thinking. This is more short-term thinking. What can I do right now to cut my costs? And we have a great tool that actually helps you do exactly that.
Right.
It's called the Financial Freedom Tool.
And the key to the Financial Freedom Tool is that it helps you pinpoint opportunities on where exactly you can cut your spending so that you're not cutting things that don't make a difference.
Yeah, and what we've done with this tool is we've taken business tools and we've put them into this software for consumers. So software for us everyday people. And it helps us compare our finances to other people like us. In other words, it helps us, in business speak, it helps us benchmark ourselves. So we can uncover possible areas where we're spending too much money very quickly. I'm talking, you can see it in seconds.
Right. For example, you can look at how much you're spending on entertainment. So like your cable, compare that to your neighbors, people in your income bracket, and you could see, oh, wow, we're spending a couple $100 more a month than the average, than the norm, than people that make the amount of money we do. So that's where we should cut some costs. How can we cut a couple $100 there?
Yes, unless you think it's complicated, we boil it all down to smiley faces and frowny faces.
Yeah.
Smiley faces mean you're doing good. Frowny faces means, okay, here's an area of opportunity where we could actually save more money. And once again, you can spot it at the snap of a finger.
Yeah, so learn more about that at financialfreedomtool.com. You can always reach out to us, too. We're happy to tell you more about it.
And we thank you so much for listening to our show today.
Until next time,
here's to your big success.
Tips to be your best with the Professor and Mary-Lynn for your big success.
Find big success at biggsuccess.com.